you grow up playing games, depending on where you start out at. It could be the Atari, it could be the Nintendo, it could be the PS1 for, potentially, right? I mean, we're all of different age groups, right? But the one thing that always seems to be consistent among us gamers is eventually you grow up. And then you sit here and think, what happened to my old game systems? Because we don't really think about this when we're younger. We get the new game system and we think, we don't care about that old system. We want the new hotness. We want those 64 bits, right? The Nintendo 64. You didn't care about the Super Nintendo. You don't care about that NES anymore. Then the PlayStation 1 comes along. You're like, oh, this is awesome. You end up either throwing away or your parents throw away or potentially donate. I don't know if that was a thing at the time. Your old systems. And so you end up years later down the road and wondering, where did all my old games go? That's kind of the position that a lot of gamers seem to be in. I've been in that position, and I'm sure you, if you're a gamer and you're watching this video, you've been in that position. So how do we play old games at this point? You either buy for crazy prices old systems and old games, which honestly could fail at any time because the hardware simply is old. Granted, the old hardware is built better, so I mean, it lasts a long time, but it's expensive and there's no guarantee it's going to stay around and that you'll be able to play. It could break. And then who do you take it to repair? I don't know people who repair these old systems anymore. So game preservation, at least as far as I'm aware, over the last 5 or 6 years has become a big thing. It could be longer than that, but I've been aware of it only for the last few years. People want to play old games. You want to ask why? Well, I mean, that's a whole different topic because, new games nowadays, they don't always live up to the hype and people are always playing games. So if new games don't live up to the hype, well, their only option is to play old games. We have an article here over on Games Radar. It talks about publishers are absolutely terrified preserved video games could be used for recreational purposes. So the U.S. Copyright Office has struck down a major effort for game preservation. Publishers are terrified that people are going to play the old games and not the new games. It's a theory that I've had, and I think Apple had a lawsuit about this as well. Now, they claimed it was for legit reasons. Who knows? I've had a theory that technology, even in our appliances at home, things are built so much differently nowadays, cars as well, that they break down a lot easier. They're made in a system where they want you to continue to buy, because if everybody buys something and it lasts forever, well, nobody's going to buy that stuff anymore, right? Because they don't need it. So they've created a system where things have a much shorter life cycle and they will break down a lot easier, a lot quicker, and you're either forced to pay exorbitant costs to repair or you're the cheaper option and buy a new appliance, whatever that may be. Publishers want you buying the new games. They don't want you playing the old games. For the past 3 years, the Video Game History Foundation has been supporting with the Software Preservation Network on a petition to allow libraries and archives to remotely share digital access to out-of-print video games in their collections. Under the current anti-circumvention rules in Section 1201 of the DMCA, libraries and archives are unable to break copyright protection on games in order to make them remotely accessible to researchers. I don't know what researchers they're referring to, but basically the long and short of it is they're still being covered under copyright protection. Essentially, this exemption would open up the possibility of a digital library where historians and researchers could check out digital games that run through emulators. The VGFH argues that around 87% of all video games released in the US before 2010, holy shit, that recent, are now out of print. The only legal way to access those games now is through the occasional exorbitant prices and often failing hardware that defines the retro gaming market. And that is a huge issue. You can't play these old games unless you're willing to pay 3 to 4 times the price, it seems, and it's crazy. So for me, I think part of the problem, outside of the prices, like I said earlier, is the fact that these things are going to break down. They're old systems if you do find them and you end up buying them. We need a way to make sure these games are around forever for people to play. And that means putting them on new hardware, putting them in emulators, right? Put them on these emulators so that people can actually continue to play these games. Still, the U.S. Copyright Office has said no. The registrar concludes that proponents did not show that removing the single user limitation for preserved computer programs or permitting off-premises access to video games are likely to be non-infringing. She also notes that the greater risk of market harm with removing the video game exemptions premise limitation, given the market for legacy video games. So they're worried about the market because people probably make a killing selling these old video games. There needs to be a way to allow people to get access to these things through emulators and other methods without infringing on copyright. I'm not smart enough to know about all this stuff, to be honest with you. All I can say is there has to be a way to make sure that video games are always available for people to play. The hardware itself for some of these games, especially if you want to play the Atari and the NES, it's getting harder and harder to find because they don't always, look, people throw them away. They end up in landfills, they end up in dumps, or they just get outright destroyed. So the hardware itself is getting harder and harder to find. And so what we need to make sure people have access to are the games in some other platform that is more modern. That rule incites the belief of the Entertainment Software Association and other industry lobby groups that there would be a significant risk that preserved video games could be used for recreational purposes. I'm not... Well, what is it going to be used for? That was my concern when they say, researchers. What researchers? What are they researching when they talk about this? That's part of the confusion that I was having as I was reading this article. It says, look right here, to make them remotely accessible to research. What are they researching? Am I missing something here? I don't follow. Of course, I would imagine this would be used for recreational purposes. That's kind of the whole point of video games. People want to play video games for recreational purposes. We cannot, of course, entertain the notion that researchers enjoy their subject for even a moment. More importantly, this also ignores the fact that libraries already lend out digital versions of more traditional media like books and movies to everyday people for what can only be described as recreational purposes. Well, how else are these people supposed to get a hold of these older video games if somebody's not allowing them to get it through, emulator or something like this? Members of the VGHF are naturally unhappy with the decision. Unfortunately, lobbying efforts by right holder groups continue to hold back progress. The group says in a statement, noting the ESA's absolutionist position that it would not support a similar sort of copyright reform under any circumstances. I'm proud of the work that we and the orgs we partnered with did to try and change copyright law. We really gave it our all. I can't see what else we could have done. This fails the needs of citizens in favor of a weak sauce argument from the industry, and it's really disappointing. I don't know what these researchers are, what they're all about, but if you don't have a game that's in print anymore, there needs to be a better way for gamers and players to recreationally play your game, because the market can be crazy expensive. Depending on if the game is more rare and more widely in demand, the price is going to go up. I've seen prices of some of these old games just be crazy expensive. So there needs to be a way to allow these people to get access to this stuff at a reasonable price. Emulators have been a good way, but Nintendo and other people have been going through and shutting a lot of those down, so they lose access to a lot of these. Yeah, so something needs to change with our copyright system. I understand the point of copyright, but I think having the ability to hold on to it forever, even after you've stopped producing that content, I think is bad. If you're not printing the game anymore, you're not selling it. And if you're not selling it, there is no harm to you. So why would you not allow someone to publish the game or have access to individual copies of the game if people wanted access to it? I mean, it makes no sense to me. I hope this eventually changes, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Are you okay with the copyright system the way it is? Do you think it should be changed so that people will have access to these old video games? What are your concerns with it? I think it should be changed. I think there is some room here for it to be modified while protecting the rights of both the gamers and the corporation. But I don't know if it will happen. So that's all I got for you today, guys. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Hit thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel for more content, and I will talk to you guys next time.